Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live, talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynn at pghcitypaper.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Hey, I'm doing about 20 things at once here. Excuse me. There, I think. Hey, how you doing? It's July 3rd. Remember when Sophie was mayor and she used to, I think it happened for a few years. She'd have the fireworks go off on July 3rd instead of the 4th to save money because if it's July 4th, then all the support personnel, the police, security, all that kind of stuff get paid double time, I think, right? And so she thought, well, then let's do it on July 3rd. I think I'm remembering that right. Well, this is our last show of the week. We're taking the whole weekend off to recover from the 4th of July tomorrow, which normally one doesn't have to recover from, but I suspect we will, given what Donnie is playing. I mean, stop and think about it. Americans, think of all the 4th of July parades you've been to as a kid. From the time you were a kid, I'm remembering a lot. And they're just typically American. And you never saw a tank or a missile or the kind of military crapola that, the Russians love and North Korea loves. It's not what we do. Never have. When you're the best, the biggest, the toughest nation on earth, you don't need to parade your weaponry around. Don't watch tomorrow. Don't watch him. Keep those ratings as low as they can go. MSNBC is not even going to air it live. Good for them. Well, headline, front page, New York Times today. Squalor is the first word. Squalor. And that is a word employed not by Democrats seeing the detention centers with their own eyes. No, this is the wording, the verbiage of the Department of Homeland Security's own independent watchdog who was asked to go in, take a look, and did so over the course of the last few weeks. And they took pictures. This is the Office of the Inspector General of the Department of Homeland Security. And the pictures we have not seen before. And if it doesn't look exactly like what we had been told, actually worse, the crowding, the people standing cheek to jowl, standing room only, behind chain link fencing, people in cages, children in cages on concrete floors. The Office of Inspector General says they encountered, and they went to a number of facilities, some with children, some with just adults. and they found squalor. Not enough food, not enough sanitary access to no laundry facilities, access to no hot meals, no showers. People clamoring desperately to be let out, holding notes up against fencing and windows, screaming for help. How can you celebrate the 4th of July tomorrow at all? It's a celebration of freedom. Squalor, pervasive in detention centers, is the headline, and the subhead is Government Report Backs Depictions by Democrats. And so even though administration officials have been telling us that those Democrats were lying, that things were fine, yes, we're overcrowded, but things are fine, people are being treated humanely. You look at these pictures. Just a few days ago, the head of Customs and Border Patrol called the Democrats' allegations unsubstantiated, called his facilities, and the facility specifically in Clint, Texas, clean and well managed. Lies, just extraordinarily bold lies. And thank God there is one. The Office of Inspector General is a part of our government that still apparently is functioning in the real world. Yesterday, doctors in Texas who have cared for some of these detainees, specifically the children, said that they were surprised, having seen the pictures and the facilities, that more children haven't died. As far as we know, 6 have. The doctor said children have had life-saving medications taken from them. They have been released seriously ill. This is not a country I pledge allegiance to. Is not. So, later in the show, we're going to have Ryan Dito on. He is a crack reporter, and he has a passion for covering immigration issues here in Pittsburgh, and he has a story out that is also extraordinary. Let's just give you the first paragraph. Pennsylvania has the most aggressive immigration officers in the nation. A new report says that ICE agents here in Pennsylvania have carried out the highest percentage of arrests per undocumented immigrant of any state. They are rounding up people left, right, and center. They're grabbing them out of their where they are working. They're grabbing them out of their homes, out of schools. They're tricking them into showing up for a hearing or something, and arresting them there. In terms of what's called community arrest, Pennsylvania is at the top of all states in the country. The next closest state is Arizona. And you know Arizona, understandably, has probably a much larger population. But even there, they are not as conscientious grabbing people. And it's purely because of what are called aggressive tactics used by ICE. So, I don't know. We're going to talk to Ryan about it. I want to know, what we can do. I saw. Oh, it didn't go through. I had mentioned during yesterday's show that I had heard of a number of people being arrested at an ICE facility. But I wasn't clear where. But they were doing what I think more of us should be doing. And I saw a tweet, and this is from a woman, and she said, I have just been arrested. She's one of the people. And they're all Jews, with 17 other Jews outside of the ICE detention facility in Boston. And they were there protesting the inhumane, dehumanizing, abusive behavior of our government toward these desperate people. And we need to think about action that we can do, because to not take action is complicity, I believe. And I don't know about you, but I think a patriotic American in these times would be willing to be arrested, would be willing to try to shut the machinery of this disgusting government down. Someone emailed me yesterday accusing me of having fomented insurrection, which I guess is what? Treason. And I would say this is how bad things have gotten, that people don't know that protest, defiant protest, is as American as apple pie, and one of the things we should celebrate tomorrow on the 4th of July. Celebrate those first insurrectionists and protesters who had the courage that we seem to lack. All right, sorry to be such a bummer, but I don't know how. I don't know how you can be anything else but a bummer. I'm sorry. I want to point something else out, too. I think the New York Times did a piece on it the other day, and it was, it's been mentioned before, but I just really want to underscore it when we're talking about using our right to vote as a means of protest and of ridding ourselves of these deplorable, repulsive repulsive people who have taken our government over and are remaking our country. It would not be enough to elect a Democrat to the White House if we do not also take the Senate. Because let us remind ourselves of who now controls the Senate. And I don't mean just Republicans, I mean Mitch McConnell. And he has shut that body down. He doesn't take up legislation. The only thing he does is continued to pack the federal courts with often people who are not qualified, but they're qualified politically. And they're wet behind the ears. They're young, so they'll be there the rest of our lives. Democrats will be able to do nothing. A Democratic president will be able to do nothing. If we don't control the Senate. And to control the Senate, Democrats need to pick up four seats. It's not clear that we'll be able to do that. And one of the things that has happened, which just makes me crazy, is that all those wannabe presidents, those 20-plus people who are clogging the debate stages, among those people are probably strong Senate candidates as well as senators. But they're not running for the Senate. Beto O'Rourke, for instance, he's not going to be the president of the United States. It'd be better if he'd try the Senate in what will be a huge Democratic turnout national election. And it would be better if Beto O'Rourke, rather than losing in this presidential race, were to spend his attention, time, and energy trying to get a seat in the U.S. Senate. And the same could be said of John Hickenlooper, who could win. He was a popular governor. He could win a Senate seat, but he's not running. The same is true of the other governors that are in the race. If there is a Senate race, there's Hickenlooper in Colorado, there's Steve Bullock in Montana, and they're not running where they should. Stacey Abrams, who could have run in Georgia, said no. If we don't put our best people out there trying to take these Senate seats, then what is the point of electing a Democrat to the White House who will not be able to see any of his or her agenda realized? I'm just saying. Bob and Braddock writes, I'm sorry. I had an allergic reaction last night that just scared me. I mean, I was sleeping. It woke me up, and I could hardly breathe. And it wasn't asthma. My throat was closing up. I don't know. And I'm still a little not right. Forgive me. I mean, I know I often hack and cough a lot, but this is different today. Bob and Braddock writes, heads up on CNN not airing Trump's 4th of July. They're not either? I know MSNBC is not. I wasn't aware that CNN wasn't. Trump apparently tweeted that this morning. Ironically, CNN plans to air a special report on white nationalism. What? That's good. Let's, this is Politico reporting. MSNBC will not carry his salute to America. Fox, of course, is. C-SPAN is. CNN is not clear, if I see this correctly. ABC will put it on its streaming channel and will provide local stations with a feed, which is pretty much the same thing that NBC is apparently doing. I don't know. You know, there's going to be a lot of, Trump supporters there, and I imagine there's going to be protesters, and I'm frankly worrying about violence. Now, D.C. police, and given that he's there, the Secret Service will, I'm sure, I don't know, I'm not sure, be able to prevent it, but I don't know. Jonathan writes, this is the first 4th of July in my memory that I cannot wish people a happy 4th or happy Independence Day, where I used to feel joy and pride even early in Trump's administration for our great nation. Now I feel sadness and dismay. Children and adults in less than zoo-like conditions. Yeah, go to the Humane, the Animal Rescue League, the Humane Society, and you will see better conditions for those animals than we're providing for fellow human beings. It is as un-American, the way I understand what America means, as it can be. As it are the tanks and the show that this horrifying president is going to put on tomorrow. And Jonathan can't believe it either. He says, on our shores in America and tanks on our streets, I can't feel joy or pride in America because it doesn't feel like my America. That's right. It's not. It's not mine either. This one I will fight. This one I will fight. I will not defend this America. I want the America of what I remember, and granted, hardly a perfect union, hardly a perfect nation. We know that. But we tried. Enough of us tried. It seems we moved forward. Tried. So Jonathan says, I am not going to celebrate tomorrow. I'm going to reminisce about what we were, think with hope about what many, many of us still are, and recommit to doing everything I can to do my little part in restoring America so I can go back to celebrating the 4th of July in the future. It's beautifully said. Thank you. as long as there's not going to be a happy show. I can't, why should we have a happy show when we know what's happening in our own country? Let me tell you something else that's happening. God damn it. Excuse me. I don't know if you saw this, but this story is, I wish I could say it's mind-blowing. And here again, it's about people in power abusing their power extraordinarily. This is about a judge in New Jersey. And it took, I believe, almost 2 years to overthrow what this judge did. I'm just going to read, because I can't paraphrase this. I'm just going to read this report. It's extraordinary. The 16-year-old girl was visibly intoxicated, her speech slurred, when a drunk 16-year-old boy sexually assaulted her in a dark basement in New Jersey during a party. The boy filmed himself penetrating her from behind, her torso exposed, her head hanging down. He later shared the video among his friends and sent a text that said, "When your first time having sex is rape." The judge who got this case said it wasn't rape. He even wondered if it was sexual assault. He said, do I even have it here? He said, rape is something, that's like two guys holding a knife or a gun on a woman. Two guys she doesn't know and then beating her up. That's what rape is. And then this judge said that the boy was from a good family. Must have been white. That he attended an excellent school. That he had terrific grades. That he was an Eagle Scout. And so the judge said that the prosecutors were way too aggressive in this case, that the prosecutors should have explained to the girl and to her family that pressing charges of rape would destroy the boy's life. So the judge denied prosecutors' motion to try the 16-year-old as an adult. The judge went on to say he is clearly a candidate for not just college, but probably for a good college. An appeals court finally has turned all of that upside down and scathingly rebuked this jerk. Okay, Ryan's trying to get in. Hi.
Hello.
Hello. Grab a seat.
Yep.
You're going to have to talk more than me because my voice is
Okay, that's fine.
really
That's not a problem for me.
I know it's not. I got the right guy. I didn't even know I was going to be in this shape. Well, we started the show talking about the conditions that we now know exist in these camps because
Yes.
of the Inspector General's
Yes.
report
Oh,
and
okay.
photographs.
Okay.
The photographs more astonishing than I think any.
We're talking about the border patrol facilities. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
extraordinary.
It really is. Like, it's definitely one of those things that I hope people just look at what's happening. You know, one of those things, whether or not people, politicians on both sides are parroting their messaging. I think it's just important to really just to look at the thing, especially the Inspector General, right? Because that's Trump's office.
Yeah, it's actually a part of our government that functioned.
Yeah. Yeah.
As it should.
Yeah.
But so you looked into where is it? Where is it?
up
I should
higher.
keep
It's up
going.
higher, yeah.
It's higher.
Yeah. You passed it actually.
I had it
Yeah. keep
before.
going. One more. There it is.
Thank you. Nothing much is working with me today. Okay. So this is mind blowing. Pennsylvania has the most aggressive ICE
ICE agents in the
in the country.
Yes, and just to sort of base off too, there's basically two immigration departments in the country, right? There's Border Patrol, which is where the camps are, and then there's ICE, which is the Interior Immigration Office that doesn't cover the border. Basically, it covers everything else inside the country in terms of enforcing immigration laws on immigrants. So we don't really have a Border Patrol presence in Pennsylvania. We are near enough to the border that Border Patrol can function here, like near Erie and even actually all the way down to Pittsburgh. It's like 100 miles from the border. But most of our immigration things are
ICE.
are through ICE. Yeah.
ICE and aided in any way by local police or state police?
A lot, actually. I think that's so. Just to give context of what is happening is in terms of us having the most aggressive agents, we don't have even close to the most amount of undocumented immigrants in Pennsylvania.
I mean, not at all.
We're very middle of the road in the state. In Pittsburgh, we have the fewest of any large metro area.
Correct.
Philadelphia has more, but still not to a level that you see in Texas or Arizona or Florida or California or New York. And so we're not having the most arrest, but per the percentage of immigrants that
Right.
we have by far the most aggressive acting agents, and especially arrests where ICE is individually going into neighborhoods and taking people, basically. They're going into people's homes, they're going into people's places of work, they're waiting for people outside of courts, after they have their immigration hearing or something, or after they have their, after even undocumented immigrants that are, I guess, brave enough, or maybe not brave is not the right word, but are compelled enough to go meet with immigration officials to maybe try to settle how they can get naturalized or something like that. ICE is waiting out there for people and taking them and then detaining them and possibly deporting them. So I think that's something that's really stark about Pennsylvania is that I think we had 25 per 100,000 undocumented immigrants of these community arrests. The next closest state was 11. So,
Jeez.
We're talking about very, very aggressive ICE agents. And there's been previous reporting than from what I reported, which was really just on a study by the Philly Inquirer and by ProPublica. That shows how aggressive they are. They take people who are marrying American citizens. Like, they take people who are non-criminals. I think of
let's talk about the one case that I know really touched you. How could it not touch you? And didn't get other than our city paper, I don't know that.
We're talking about Martín
Yes,
Esquivel?
we are.
Yeah.
So
yes. So Martín Esquivel Hernandez was an undocumented immigrant that I wrote about a couple years ago. Broke the story of basically this guy who was a community advocate who had volunteered for various organizations in the thing. He had no local criminal record. He had an American-born son. He had kids that qualify for DACA.
He was widely respected.
Yeah, yes. And I mean, everybody I talked to,
everybody loved this guy.
Yes, and he was picked
hardworking.
up. He was picked up, and after a alleged traffic stop where he had rolled a stoplight, allegedly, a stop sign, I should say, and Mount Lebanon police turned him in, basically. They initially denied that to me when I first did my reporting, but later when the court documents came out, said that a Mount Lebanon police officer, maybe not the police in general, but a police officer that worked there contacted ICE, and that tipped them off. And then that's when they set out to detain and eventually deport Martin Esquivel. And I think his story really is emblematic of what we're talking about here, what we're talking about of the aggressive tactics in our state of ICE. Some people might celebrate that because they just don't think that undocumented immigrants should exist in America, but they do, and there's millions of them, and they pay taxes, and they commit less crimes. And
they do. I mean, native-born folks like us are the ones who do by far the most crime.
Yeah, there's a study from the Cato Institute, which is actually a libertarian
that's not
study.
A liberal.
It's not a liberal study. It's a libertarian thing that showed that undocumented immigrants actually commit less crimes, far less crimes than native-born populations. So it really is stark when we see how many numbers we're talking about in terms of, 25 for every 1,000 immigrants. If you're talking about a neighborhood that has 1,000 people, like, I don't know, let's say like Beachview. Beachview could have 1,000 undocumented immigrants. I don't know. It's impossible to pare it down. You're talking about 25 people out of 1,000. That's crazy. That's like a high school class. That's like taking a whole English class. Like just taking them.
And what happens to them?
Well, they get detained. They're usually sent to.
Are they put in a jail here?
Yes. So Beaver County Jail actually has a contract with ICE that they openly accept ICE detainees without warrants.
Allegheny doesn't.
Allegheny allows access to ICE to go into the jail. There was a report that I mentioned in my article that shows, I think, like 14 or 11 county jails in Pennsylvania say that they do this. I would assume that it's actually more. I don't know how many of them actually totally deny access. I think maybe Philadelphia does. I'm not sure if Allegheny County can say we won't even allow you access. They might be able to. I don't know.
I thought the city is said to be a sanctuary city, are we not? And the mayor seems to
this is where it's like, it's so confusing. First of all, these words are so loaded, and they're used by conservative politicians all the time to stoke fear into what it is. A sanctuary city is many things. One of the things it is basically a jail that just does not allow ICE to hold detainees without a warrant signed by a judge. That is most of the jails in Pennsylvania. There's a few, like Beaver, like Cambria County, that don't do that. Erie County, I believe, too. But most jails don't do that. That is because of a lawsuit that happened in Allentown when the Lehigh County Jail held a U.S. citizen for 3 days under the assumption that he was a undocumented immigrant. That U.S. citizen then sued Lehigh County, Allentown, the federal government, won a ton of money, over like $100,000 or something.
I think the ACLU represents.
Yes, and then so a bunch of jails in Pennsylvania said, "Oh, we better not do this." And then the right, media machine was basically like, "Look at all these sanctuary cities," and it's like you're not being honest in how they're portraying these things. And then other cities like Pittsburgh. Sure, you could claim us a sanctuary city, but our policy is basically one in which our Pittsburgh's officers do not initiate contact with ICE. They don't call ICE.
Like the Mount Lebanon cop.
The Mount Lebanon cop did, exactly. So there's a written policy that says you don't initiate contact with ICE. And if you do, you might get in trouble. But that's it. It's not actually like a legal thing. It's like you might get in trouble from your boss, basically. Maybe you'll get fired, but maybe not. I don't know. And so that's what Pittsburgh's policy is. But they still can communicate with ICE if ICE
Well, look,
reaches
a
out to
cop
them.
who wants to can just do an anonymous tip to ICE.
100%.
I mean,
that's why this whole sanctuary city thing is total garbage, and it's a total fear-mongering campaign on the right, and it's really frustrating because our Senator Pat Toomey has been one of the leading people that have been trying to get a bill passed that would outlaw sanctuary cities, and it's really frustrating because he never talks to anybody that would actually ask him hard questions on these things, and he only goes, I'm very upset about this actually, and he only goes to the right-wing media to basically be like, I'm reintroducing my bill, and it's like, yo, have an interview with somebody who actually knows what they're talking about.
So he won't talk to you.
No, one time I talked to him about it when he was running for office, and he yelled at me, and we got in this big fight basically, like even though I was the only one asking him about not Trump. And yes, I would, Senator Pat Toomey or People's People, if you want to have an interview with me about the sanctuary city bill, I would love that. Anyway, so back to where we stand in Pennsylvania. This is a combination of things. It's not only the ICE office here being incredibly aggressive in taking people, so aggressive that after the ProPublica and Philly Inquirer stories came out, the Pennsylvania state troopers basically passed a new rule where they basically kind of do what Pittsburgh does, and they don't initiate contact with ICE unless there's a warrant. And so, but there's also nothing that the guidelines are still iffy on like whether or not there's punishment if you do, whether or not these things. So immigrant groups are still trying to get that law to or that policy to be more rigid, and it's not. So, but again, when that happened, the right, like Martina White, state rep from Philly, who's a conservative rep, and a bunch of other people, like made a huge fuss about it. And basically they're like, we're a sanctuary state. And again, they're not operating in good faith. They never do on this issue because it's their signature campaign issue. And it's really frustrating because at the same time, we're talking about basically terrifying a lot of these communities, and this is the communities that we need to grow the population. It's the only thing that's growing the population in the state.
This city, it has the fewest immigrants, right, of any.
Yes, we have the fewest. We have the fewest undocumented immigrants. We also, I believe, have the fewest immigrants of any large metro area.
Right, and so we're not growing, by the way.
No, the only places that are growing are Butler County, and that's mostly because a lot of people in the area are just moving to Butler County because there's a lot of new housing development up in Cranberry, and but Westmoreland County, Washington County, well, that one's on the fence. That's kind of like Cranberry too, where people like moving to Cannonsburg because there's a lot of new housing development. But Beaver, Westmoreland, Fayette, Allegheny, we're still shrinking, and the only way in America that places are actually growing is because of immigration. And if we're basically saying,
and also we're old. We're the oldest.
Yes. I wrote about that.
We're the oldest, whitest. And let me tell you, that doesn't bode well for the future.
Yes. And like, again,
hello?
this isn't a signaling like, oh, it's bad to be old and white. It's definitely not bad to be old and white. You know, I'm going to be old and white eventually, hopefully.
I'm old and white.
And so I just think that, like, but if we're actually talking about our region growing in the economic way that so many leaders talk about,
old and white ain't the way to do it.
Exactly. It has to go through international migration, immigration, and a good way to signal to immigrants that we're a welcoming place is not to deport all the people that maybe overstayed their visa.
Exactly. So these aggressive tactics by ICE here in Pennsylvania, you think, I call them all refugees. I mean, you think these people don't talk to each other? I mean,
they 100% do. Those are most of the people they're talking to.
That's right. So they wouldn't say, hey, you got to come up here to Pittsburgh.
So yeah,
because they let us work, and you're not in fear, and your kids can go to school, and you can.
That's how.
And why wouldn't we want people, these good people, with their family?
They send their kids to public schools, so they grow our school population, which is also really important. That's tied to property taxes, which is really important. If you shrink the school population, like many places in Beaver County has had to raise their property taxes over and over again because their schools are shrinking.
And let us explain. The vast 99% of the hard-working, law-abiding.
Higher percentages than the native population. So what do you have to fear? Nothing.
What?
You know?
Well, unless you're...
Yes, and that's why we have serious racism
racist
problems in our region. And I have been beating my drum, at least on Twitter, trying to get people to realize. And no, I mean, a lot of people do realize it, but we need our leaders basically to stand up and basically confront this head on.
Yeah,
and instead,
we
just kind of go, oh, we're going to be fine. And like, no, we're not. Even if we bring in more, we're having success in bringing in tech into the area.
Right.
We're going to bring in more people with natural gas, which I know a lot of people are upset about, including myself, but that's how it is. That is not a permanent solution to growing the population. One, a lot of those natural gas workers are going to come from Maryland and Texas and wherever, and they're going to move in, work a lot, and then move out. And then the tech thing is also good. It is definitely good to have more jobs and to have a different kind of economy than we did. But tech cities are experiencing a terrible inequality. And like San Francisco, my home, where I grew up, like has terrible inequality. I have friends who work at Apple who can't afford to buy a house. Like, what's going on? Like, do we want that for our city? How do we want to grow our city? And I really think that maybe I'm making too much of a case of this, but I really think that ICE aggressive tactics are something that people need to realize are intertwined into everything.
That's right. Why would anybody come here if they've got to be looking over their shoulders all the time?
And I think you made a really good point that like how immigrants community grow are through word of mouth.
Come here.
Yes.
That's how it works.
Yes, because they're not reading Mayor Peduto's welcoming initiative.
Shocking.
So they're just waiting for their friends and family that live in another area to say, hey, this place is pretty nice. This people are nice to us here. Like if we can find jobs, we can send our kids to school, we can go to church, we can do all these things. And the more that we can do that, the more we'll become like these other immigrant hubs like Chicago or like Miami or like Los Angeles, New York, that have that growth. And so I guess we have to ask ourselves a question. Do we want to grow our population or not? Do we seriously want to? I think if you ask most people on the street, they'd say yes, absolutely. But then if you confront them with these other things, with our inequality, with our immigration tactics, with our general racism towards African Americans, if you don't confront them with that, it's like it's not going to happen. Black people are leaving the city, the only people that maybe are moving are like rich white people that are either going to work in tech or going to frack for a bit and then leave. We need sustaining people to stay here, and immigrants who start families is probably a pretty good way. That is literally the history of this city already.
It is the history of this country.
Yeah.
These hardworking, desperate, courageous people.
Yeah. Sorry, I was talking a little bit.
No, I met a woman. I had a manicure yesterday, and the manicurist was Chinese, and she started talking to me.
Yeah.
And what she told me so upset me that I left almost in tears.
What did she say?
She has been here for 4 years. Her English is incredibly good. She's is married to a nice Jewish man that she met in Squirrel Hill. She hasn't seen her son she has a 5-year-old boy who's in China.
Okay.
And she can't get him here.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tragic.
I said, so you're another mother separated from your child by our immigration policies, and you're married to an American citizen, and you are gainfully employed, and she's working like heck to get her.
Oh, it's going to take forever.
And they're just everywhere she goes, she's just bumping into closed doors.
Yeah.
And she talks to her son once a week, and he said, how do you explain to she tells me how she tries to explain to him. She hasn't seen him in 3 years. She's afraid to go see him because she is afraid she won't be able to get back into the country.
Yeah, she probably won't.
So even, I thought
Yeah.
it used to be if you were married to an American.
That makes it a little bit easier, but it's still a really long process, especially if you overstayed your visa, or if you so there's the K-1 visa, which is like kind of famous because there's that TV show about it, 90 Day Fiance, if anybody watches that. Anyway, but that's one of the easiest ways, because but you have to apply from out of the country, and then you have to go through this process, which takes a little bit of time. But then you have 90 days to come to America and then get married, and then once you're married, you're fine. You get a green card, and then you're on your path to citizenship.
She's still trying to get her green card.
And there, I don't know. I mean,
you don't know that specific case,
yeah, but a lot of times, like
just-
if you overstay your visa or something like that, then it's like a violation. And then with how aggressive ICE is acting under President Trump, then they don't care. They don't discriminate against that stuff. And if anyone's listening that is questionable about immigration stuff, there's this idea like, how do we fix it? How do we fix it? I want to say this in the most stark terms. The Republicans don't want to fix it. It is their signature campaign issue. They want you to be frustrated by it. They want you to be upset because that's what they campaign on. They had a chance to fix it when they had a trifecta in 2017. They could have done it. It's their signature issue.
They need
it's their
to keep
signature
it.
issue.
They need to keep it.
They need to keep it convoluted. They need to keep
Right.
it hard because, one, they're most far right based. Not all Republicans. # not all Republicans. Don't believe that. Don't want to just deport everybody. But there's a far right base that does. That literally just believes that every single undocumented immigrant needs to leave. And that's not most of them. I think they probably even feel that way about DACA.
What would happen?
People brought
I mean,
here.
let's talk about what would happen to the economy if.
It'd be devastating. There's papers about it. Like, there's tons of papers that have written that if you got rid of all these people, it would just be like trillions of dollars lost, basically. It would be devastating to our economy if the economic thing matters. It would be devastating to local communities.
Yeah.
Could you imagine all the towns where immigrants have based? Philadelphia, the only reason Philadelphia has gained population again, you can talk to politicians from Philadelphia, talk about this a lot. Like, it's because of immigration. If they just stripped all the immigrants from there and the undocumented immigrants too, you're talking about communities that finally rebounded that will just go back to being desolate.
Think of all the jobs these people do. Think of all the businesses that literally would
Immigrants also have a more entrepreneurial spirit, and they actually start businesses at higher rates than native-born Americans. That's one of Pennsylvania's biggest problems, is basically filling in their business districts. They have tens of thousands of business districts in Pennsylvania, which I think is one of its coolest things, is that they all have these little towns where there's bakeries and there's banks and there's all this stuff. And immigrants are the ones that would fill that in, basically,
They do.
at higher rates than native-born. Native-borns also do too, and it's great. But immigrants would do it at higher rates. They would reestablish these business districts again, like they used to be.
Like they used to do.
Was.
Like my grandfather did.
I wrote about Ford City a couple of years ago, and Ford City is a company town that's on the Allegheny River. It's up in Armstrong County. It's the birthplace of PPG. It's where the first plate glass factory was. The workers there, they were immigrants. They were German, Italian, Slovak, and there were also some African Americans from the South that came up there too, that basically started their communities, filled out the business district, went to work for PPG, and now the town is falling apart, is dying. They can't replace it with anything. And I just think these communities need to think about how they're going to replace their towns, or they're going to let them die. And I think when we come in and we applaud ICE for taking all these immigrants away, you're never going to see those kind of towns come back. Yeah, you're going to see Cranberry do fine, because that's basically just
it's just
rich, white, and maybe even black, but like rich native-born Americans that are
there's no blacks up there.
Well, there's
Are
not
you
a lot.
kidding
There's
me?
not a lot, but there's some. And
Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
I mean,
Heinz
I'm
World's got a
sorry.
restaurant up there.
Yeah. Come on.
But moving up there into nice suburban areas. But if you're talking about revitalizing towns like Monessen, like Ambridge, like Ford City, like Braddock, like McKeesport, you're gonna need some population growth, and rich people are not moving to those towns.
So I saw that a group of people tried to shut down an ICE facility in Boston yesterday.
Okay.
It's a group of Jews.
Okay.
Who were saying,
Yeah, the
when
Jews
we
have
said
been just
never
super
again,
progressive on this stuff.
Yeah, well,
yeah. Including here in Pittsburgh.
and they
too.
were arrested.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So there were 17 Jews arrested trying to block an ICE facility
I
in
think
Boston.
I saw that too. Yeah.
Okay. What can people like me and a lot of people in my audience, I got an email the other day from someone saying, "What? Organize us.
Yeah.
What can we do?"
Yeah.
Is there what should
I got it. I know what we need to do.
Well, tell me.
Okay.
What as a reporter would you like to cover?
Well, I'm an advocate reporter, so I'm just going to be frank
ahead.
that this is an advocacy issue. There are towns in Allegheny County that actively work with ICE. Castle Shannon, in my report, shows that Castle Shannon actively has a written down plan that authorizes officers to contact ICE when they're suspicious of somebody. And they'll basically contact and say...
Wait, suspicious? You mean
yeah.
they see a brown person walking?
Well, that's one of the concerns that a lot of advocates and that the ACLU have, is that this can lead to racial profiling if you have these things, which is unconstitutional. And so, like, I would say the local advocacy, go to Castle Shannon. Those elected officials choose they have control over the sheriff, over their police office, basically. Usually it's mayors. I'm not exactly sure. It's either mayors or council that has controls over municipal police departments. They're the ones that could put pressure, that could actually say, you can't do this, or like, you have to change your policy. They can do that. They have the authority over it. I've always wondered why Mount Lebanon didn't declare itself a so-called sanctuary city. Because one, there's 4 Dems to 1 Republican on their council. Most of them are pretty progressive. Mount Lebanon is an incredibly high Democratic supporting area, and yet their officers are literally actively working with ICE. Like, there's proof in my reporting. Why aren't you telling the sheriff, don't do this? Like, we don't believe this is right. You could go to every single police department in our area that is basically not Pittsburgh and just ask them how they contact with ICE. Maybe they don't have a policy. Maybe you want their borough councils to pass a policy that says you don't contact ICE unless they have a criminal warrant. And so signed by a judge.
Okay, where is ICE? They have a facility where if we would want to like just picket ICE or something like that.
There's been some protests of ICE outside their facility in the South Side.
South Side.
Bend the Arc is a Jewish organization that has led a lot of them. Casa San Jose, which I mentioned in my story, is a big immigrant rights organization. I think that's a good place to start, but I would love personally as a reporter as well. I'll report it in a heartbeat.
Going after these
people going in. I think Mount Lebanon is a really interesting place to start. I think Dormont. I think a lot of these very liberal Democratic areas have police departments that are actively wanting to work with ICE.
How do we show that that's what's happening?
It's hard. So in my story, there's a link to a Temple University study that they basically sent out right-to-know requests to a bunch of towns in Western Pennsylvania and asked them for their policies. The only one that really responded was Castle Shannon, well, that actually had a written policy because it was a right-to-know request, so they had to give it to them. And so Castle Shannon, we know, definitely has a written policy, but these other ones don't have any policy. In fact, I'm just going to pull it up right now and I'll list it off. So they don't have policies. Pittsburgh is the only city, I believe, in Allegheny County, at least that's been proven, that has a written policy that says you do not initiate contact with ICE. They can contact us and we will respond, I believe, if they have the goods, if they have a criminal warrant signed by a judge. And then you could even pressure Allegheny County. Maybe we need a pressure campaign that sees if Allegheny County Jail can withhold all contact with ICE. It says you can't even come to the jail because of these reasons. I'm not sure about that. That's something that I'm sure the county executive would say. But again, we need experts to figure this stuff out too. I can't solve all these things. But
I can't stop all these things. Well, why not?
I know. Wait, I got it.
I
really want to list them off. Okay, so here we go. So
these are...
So so the Temple and a group called Juntos in Philadelphia, which is an immigrant rights group, did a study, and they sent right to know requests to these departments, and these departments basically said, we don't have anything written, which means that they could have policies that could limit contact with ICE. Dormont, Castle Shannon, has one that actually does. Fox Chapel, Green Tree, Monroeville, Moon, Mount Lebanon, Mount Oliver, Ross, West Mifflin. Those are the people. Those are the departments that this study reached out to with a right to know request that asked if they had policies. They basically don't, except for Castle Shannon, which has a policy that actually wants to work with ICE. So these could be places that
should be pressured to
go to their borough council meeting. And this is one of the things that's like so complicated about American government. And I totally get that people don't understand it, but we have so many little forms of government, especially in Pennsylvania, one of the most.
Ugh.
And so the way to do it isn't to contact Mike Doyle. That's not the way to do it. Because he can try to introduce a bill or something like that, or
you
contact
have to go to
Conor Lamb.
the local.
You have to go to the local things in the way that Pittsburgh has passed something. If you go to your Dormont borough meeting and you go, "Hey, borough council," which is probably like 5 people you don't even know.
But if you're not, you should be a citizen of Dormont.
Yes, you can be a citizen, but
shouldn't be an outside agitator.
Sure, but you could be. It's not like all those people that protested, Peduto's gun bill. They didn't live in the city. We know they didn't live in the city. They still came here and made a fuss. You're allowed to do that. But yes, it would be better if you had Dormont citizens. Yeah. It would be better if you had Mount Lebanon citizens when you went to those things. It's better to be like, I'm from Mount Lebanon. One, I think sometimes to actually speak at borough council meetings, you need to be a resident. But that doesn't mean you can't hold a protest outside their office. It doesn't mean that you can't do things like that to garner things. So maybe there are groups in Pittsburgh that that advocate for immigration, and they can rally people in their respective boroughs to change some of these things.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for all the work you do.
Oh, thanks.
And your passion.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for being there. And we're not celebrating the 4th of July tomorrow because.
Okay.
This ain't the country that we're celebrating anymore.
It hasn't been a good week for...
no. Yeah. And don't watch. Keep his ratings down. Don't watch. Please do everything you can, including, I hope, if you live in any of those communities, get serious about this. Okay? Do something. You'll feel good. I'll see you Monday.
Great. Thanks.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.